The smog over the greater American seaboard was particularly thick that morning, a bruising shade of charcoal and violet that blocked out the sun until it was high noon. But Captain Elias Ward was not looking at the sky. He was looking at a hologram of a gravity well that threatened to tear his ship apart. And he was thinking about coffee. Specifically, he was thinking about the synthetic sludge the United Earth Navy passed off as coffee, and how much he would miss complaining about it if the tidal forces of the Jupiter Gate turned him and his crew into subatomic confetti. "Status report," Elias said, leaning back in his command chair. He kept his voice steady. The same baritone that had calmed panic during the water wars of the 40s and the orbital riots of the 50s. He ran a hand over his jaw, feeling the jagged ridge of scar tissue that ran from his ear to his collarbone, a souvenir from a peacekeeper drone that had missed its target. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, his comms officer, looked up from her console. Her face was pale, bathed in the harsh orange light of the display. "Gravimetric stabilizers are at 98%, Captain. The distortion field is fluctuating, but the math holds." "The math holds," Elias repeated, spinning his chair slightly to face the bridge crew. "Everyone loves hearing that the math holds. It is when the math lets go that things get interesting." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the bridge of the Dauntless. It was a heavy, utilitarian ship, built like a brick and armed like a fortress, designed by a species that expected the universe to be as hostile as their own history. The Dauntless was the spearhead of the Jupiter Gate exploration initiative, the desperate gamble of a civilization running on fumes. Earth was tapped out. The solar system was a quarry that had been mined dry. They needed a miracle, and the sudden stabilization of a wormhole near the Great Red Spot was the only one on offer. "Pilot, take us in," Elias ordered, "nice and slow. Treat her like she is your grandmother's china." The view screen, a massive pane of reinforced diamond glass, showed the gate. It did not look like the swirling vortices in the old movies. It looked like a rupture, a jagged tear in the fabric of space where the light of distant stars bent and broke. It was terrifying. Initiating insertion sequence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The universe folded. For a moment, there was no sound. There was no light. There was only a sensation of falling. A vertigo so intense that Elias gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. The Dauntless groaned, its ceramic composite hull protesting the impossible physics. Then, color exploded. Not the black of space, but a tunnel of violent violet and screaming gold, a corridor of energy that bypassed the laws of relativity. And then, silence. The stars returned, but they were wrong. They were too bright, too numerous, clustered in patterns that no human astronomer had ever catalogued. "System check," Elias barked, shaking the dizziness from his head. "Is everyone still solid?" "All decks reporting in," Chen said, her voice trembling with relief. "We are intact, Captain. The task force is forming up behind us. The Peregrine and the Vanguard are reporting green boards." Elias unbuckled and stood up, walking to the edge of the view screen. "Give me a visual scan." "What is out there?" The screen flickered and resolved. Elias stopped breathing, and he had expected emptiness. He had expected rocks, maybe a gas giant, perhaps a dead world ripe for mining. He had expected the silence of the frontier. Instead, he was looking at a highway. In the distance, spanning across the visual field, were ribbons of coherent light, massive traffic lanes pulsing with energy, enormous structures, glowing with a soft, bioluminescent blue, hung in the void like jewels suspended in oil. They were ring habitats, but on a scale that defied engineering as humanity understood it. They were not built of metal and rivets. They looked grown, cultivated from crystal and light. Ships moved between them, sleek, teardrop-shaped vessels that maneuvered with the fluid grace of schools of fish. "Captain," the tactical officer's voice cracked. "Sensors are lighting up. I am reading 300 contacts within 40,000 kilometers. No, 500. They are everywhere. They were not explorers. They were trespassers in a living room." Elias stared at the impossible civilization before him. "We are going to need a better diplomatic package," he muttered. "Shields up, but keep weapons cold. I do not want to look like a threat." Leora Zelshai stood in the center of the Strategos chamber, a room that did not have walls so much as fields of suspended data. She was tall, even for a Zalari, with the long, elegant limbs and four-fingered hands of the high-caste nobility. Her skin was a deep, twilight indigo, marked with complex geometric tattoos that glowed with a soft, rhythmic bioluminescence. Currently, those tattoos were pulsing a rapid, agitated teal. "Report," she commanded. Her voice was harmonic, layering 2 octaves simultaneously, a trait of her people that allowed for nuanced emotional expression. Right now, both octaves were icy. "Strategos," the sensor technician said, his own markings dull with anxiety. "We have a spatial rupture in the Aurelian sector. Coordinates correspond to the unstable anomaly near the gas giant border. 3 vessels have emerged. Their configuration is crude. Show me." The data stream coalesced into a hologram. Leora studied the human ships. They were ugly things, blocky and gray, bristling with kinetic projectile cannons and primitive fusion drives. They leaked radiation like a wounded animal bleeds. They looked ancient and violent. "Are they known?" Leora asked. "Do they match the Dominion signatures?" "Negative. They match nothing in the Concord archives. They are emitting broad-spectrum radio noise. It sounds like chaos." Leora narrowed her 4 eyes, the large, dark primary pair for low light, and the smaller, gold-flecked secondary pair for thermal and detail work. Unidentified incursions in the core systems were impossible. The balance of power between the Zalari Concord, the Dominion, and the smaller syndicates was held together by strict borders and stricter treaties. A new player, appearing out of nowhere, was a variable she did not like. "Initiate containment protocol," Leora ordered. "Send a patrol wing. Use standard dispersal warnings. Do not fire unless fired upon, but do not let them move toward the habitat rings." Her tattoos dimmed to a controlled navy blue. She was Leora Zelshai, 3rd scion of the High Council, and she did not panic. But as she watched the ugly gray ships drift closer to the grand trade lanes, she felt a cold premonition settle in her stomach. On the Dauntless, chaos was reigning. "Captain, we are being hailed," Chen shouted over the din of alarms. "Or at least, I think we are. The translation AI is cycling through 3,000 languages and coming up blank. It is trying to construct a syntax based on mathematical constants." "Put it on speakers," Elias said. A sound filled the bridge, a melodic, screeching trill that sounded like a choir of birds being strangled by a synthesizer. "Analysis," Elias barked. "The AI thinks it is a greeting," Chen said, her fingers flying across her board. I think it says, "Welcome to the Aurelian Light. Submit for scanning and trajectory assignment." Elias relaxed slightly. "Okay, that sounds bureaucratic, not homicidal. Maintain course, open a channel, broadcast the prime number sequence and the peace greeting." It was a mistake, a fatal, tragic mistake born of a software patch that hadn't been updated in 6 months, and a cultural gap wider than the wormhole they had just traversed. The Zalari word for submit was phonetically identical to the Zalari word for target lock, depending on the harmonic undertone. The human AI, unable to parse the dual tone frequency, had stripped the harmony out. To the Zalari patrol commander, a nervous young officer in a fragile interceptor, the human ships did not broadcast peace. They broadcasted a surge of fusion energy as they accelerated, an aggressive move, while remaining silent to the warning to halt. They are charging weapons. The tactical officer on the Dauntless screamed, "Energy spike detected! Helm, evasive!" Elias roared. It was too late. A beam of cohesive azure light lashed out from one of the teardrop ships. It was designed to overload the engines of a rogue cargo hauler, a non-lethal police tactic in a civilization where ships were shielded by high-frequency fields. But the Peregrine, the small scout ship flanking the Dauntless, did not have high-frequency fields. It had ceramic armor. The beam hit the Peregrine amidships. It didn't bounce off. It cooked the hull. The heat transfer was instantaneous. The scout ship's fusion core, unable to dump the excess energy, destabilized. There was no fireball in the vacuum, just a silent, violent expansion of gas and debris. The Peregrine broke in two, spilling atmosphere and bodies into the dark. Elias watched the icon for the Peregrine turn from green to black. 70 souls, gone in a heartbeat. The bridge went silent, a silence of absolute horror. Then, the training took over. The sorrow was shoved down, locked behind the scar tissue. "They killed them," the tactical officer whispered. "Battle stations," Elias said. His voice was no longer baritone, it was gravel and iron. "Free fire on that hostile. All ships execute Delta 9 maneuver." The humans were outgunned, out-teched, and lost. But they had one advantage. They were used to fighting dirty. The Dauntless and the Vanguard did not run. They vented their coolant tanks to create a sensor ghost, a cloud of supercooled gas that baffled the Zalari thermal locks. Then, Elias pulled the ship into a hard flip, using the main drive as a weapon, blasting a column of fusion fire directly at the delicate, crystalline ship that had fired the shot. The Zalari ship, designed for long-range energy duels, crumpled under the sheer kinetic force of the plasma wash. It spun out of control, its lights flickering and dying. "Cease fire!" Elias ordered before his gunners could shred the disabled vessel. He stood amidst the red alert klaxons, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the wreckage of the Peregrine, then at the overwhelming armada gathering in the distance. They had been in this new galaxy for less than 10 minutes, and they had already started a war. "Get me that channel back," Elias said. "Tell them we are holding position. Tell them if they fire again, we will turn their pretty glass ships into dust, and then tell them we want to talk." The High Concord chamber was a place of blinding brilliance. The floor was a polished mirror, reflecting the 3 suns of the Aurelian system that shone through the domed ceiling. 12 counselors sat on floating platforms, their robes woven from light refracting silk. Leora stood before them, her hands clasped behind her back. She could feel the weight of their gaze, 12 pairs of eyes, ancient and judgmental. "They are savages," Counselor Vrex hissed. Counselor Vrex. His skin was a mottled gray, his markings sharp and jagged. They destroyed a patrol interceptor with nothing but exhaust and primitive aggression. They must be purged before the Dominion sees our weakness. "They were provoked," Leora countered, her voice steady. "I have reviewed the telemetry. Our commander fired first. A disabling shot, yes, but against unshielded hulls. It was lethal. They reacted in self-defense." "Defense?" Vrex scoffed. "They are an invasive species. They come from a gravity well we have ignored for 1,000 years. If they have cracked wormhole technology, they are a threat." Or they are an opportunity, Leora said, stepping forward. Her tattoos rippled with a calming violet hue, a calculated display to lower the tension in the room. They possess kinetic weaponry we haven't seen since the Unification Wars. They are raw, yes. Dangerous, yes. But if we slaughter them, we prove we are the monsters the Dominion claims we are, and we lose whatever intelligence they hold about the wormhole. High Strategos Karen sat at the center of the crescent. He was old, his bioluminescence fading to a pale, ghostly white. He watched Leora with unreadable eyes. You advocate for mercy. Scion Zelshai, Karen asked. I advocate for data, Leora corrected. We do not know how many more are on the other side. We do not know their numbers. If we destroy this fleet, we might invite a swarm. What do you propose? Isolate the flagship, Leora said. The one commanded by the leader. He ceased fire when he could have finished off our patrol. He showed restraint. Bring him in. Interrogate him. Learn what they are, why they are here, and what they want. And the rest of his fleet? Vrex demanded. Lock them in a stasis field. If the human captain proves uncooperative, we destroy them while he watches. The room fell silent. It was a cold, brutal calculation. Leora hated the words as they left her mouth, but she knew it was the only language the council understood. Karen nodded slowly. Very well. Bring us the barbarian. You will conduct the extraction. Scion, do not fail. The surrender was a tense, ugly affair. Elias stood in the airlock of the Dauntless. He had stripped off his sidearm, a heavy magnetic rail pistol, and handed it to his second-in-command, Commander Rodriguez. You are in charge, Elena, Elias said quietly. If I am not back in 24 hours, or if they start shooting again, you burn hard for the gate. Do not wait for me. Captain, this is suicide, Rodriguez said, her eyes wet. They vaporized the Peregrine, and I vaporized their patrol ship's sensors, Elias said. We are even. Somebody has to be the grown-up here. He turned and stepped into the docking tube. The alien shuttle that had latched onto his ship was sleek, silent, and smelled faintly of ozone and cinnamon. Elias was met by a squad of 4 armored figures. They were tall, holding staffs that hummed with energy. They did not speak. They gestured. Elias raised his hands. Take me to your leader, he said, the corner of his mouth twitching in a humorless smile. I have always wanted to say that. The guards did not react. One of them clamped a bracelet around his wrist. It wasn't metal. It felt like warm, solid light. Instantly. Elias's arms were pulled down, pinned to his sides by a localized gravity field. Rough crowd, Elias muttered. They marched him onto the shuttle. As they pulled away, Elias watched the Dauntless shrink in the viewport. It looked small and fragile against the backdrop of the massive ring habitats. He felt a spike of pure, unadulterated fear, the kind he hadn't felt since he was a recruit in the mud of the Danube Basin. He shoved it down. Fear was useless. Curiosity was useful. Anger was useful. Fear just got you killed. The shuttle docked with a station that was the size of a small moon. Elias was marched through corridors of flowing glass and shifting light. He saw aliens of various shapes, some tall and slender like the soldiers, others small and floating in anti-grav chairs, stopping to stare at him. He felt like a gorilla in a shopping mall. They brought him to a cell. It wasn't a dungeon. It was a white room with soft curved walls and no furniture. The gravity here was lighter than Earth's, making him feel bouncy and uncoordinated. Wait here, a synthesized voice said from the walls. I plan on it, Elias replied to the empty room. He waited for an hour. He paced. He checked the gravity cuffs, impossible to break. He tapped the walls, solid force fields. Then, A section of the wall dissolved. Leora walked in. Elias stopped pacing. He had seen the soldiers. He had seen the citizens in the hallways. But he hadn't seen anything like her. She was luminous. That was the only word for it. Her skin was the color of deep ocean water, shifting slightly as she moved. The markings on her face and neck glowed with a soft amber light. She wore robes that seemed to float around her, defying gravity. But it was her eyes, 4 of them, that pinned him to the floor. They were intelligent, cold, and utterly alien. She held a datapad in her long, slender fingers. She did not have a weapon. Elias straightened his spine, fighting the urge to gawk. He needed to be the captain. "I am Captain Elias Ward of the United Earth Navy ship Dauntless," he said, projecting his voice. Leora stopped 3 meters from him. She tilted her head, her upper eyes narrowing while the lower ones remained wide. She looked at him as if he were a bacteria culture in a petri dish. "I am Scion Leora Zelshai," she said. Her English was accented, the vowels elongated, the R's trilled, but it was perfectly understandable. "You are smaller than I expected." Elias blinked. "Well, I left my platform heels on the ship." Leora frowned. "A malfunction in the translation? Platform heels? It is a joke." "Scion," Elias said, testing the waters. "We use humor to diffuse tension. You should try it. You look tense. Your tudada lights are blinking." Leora stiffened. She glanced down at her arm, where a faint pulse of orange betrayed her irritation. She willed it to turn blue. "I am not here for humor. Captain Ward, I am here to determine if your species is worth the resources it would take to exterminate you." Elias felt the blood drain from his face, but he didn't flinch. "Direct. I appreciate that. So, did you bring me here to talk, or just to threaten me?" "I have questions," Leora said, tapping her datapad. The wall behind her shimmered, displaying a schematic of the Dauntless. "Your vessel, it utilizes a fusion drive based on helium-3 extraction. Primitive, inefficient, and your weapons. Mass drivers. You throw rocks at near-light speed." "It works," Elias said defensively. "Ask the ship we disabled." "You rely on brute force," Leora noted, walking around him. She moved with a fluid grace that made Elias feel clumsy and heavy. "You lack shields. You lack harmonious integration. Your biological scans indicate high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. You are a species built for stress." "We are a species built for survival," Elias corrected. "We have had a rough couple of centuries. We are looking for resources, energy. We didn't know this system was occupied. Ignorance is not a defense in galactic law," Leora said. "We sent greetings," Elias snapped, his temper flaring. "Your people fired on us. You killed 70 of my crew, men and women who were just sitting there." Leora stopped. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the raw anger in his eyes, the grief he was trying to hide behind his bravado. It was fascinating. The Zalari were masters of emotional control. Their society was built on the suppression of dangerous impulses. But this human, he was leaking emotion like radiation. It was chaotic. It was repulsive. And, she realized with a jolt, it was strangely compelling. "It was a misunderstanding," Leora said, her voice softer. "A translation error? A misunderstanding?" Elias let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Tell that to the families of the dead. Tell that to the widow. We do not have widows," Leora said simply. "Our breeding is handled by the gene guilds. Bondmates are temporary." Elias stared at her. "You people are a riot. Remind me not to visit during the holidays." Leora stepped closer. The gravity field around Elias hummed. She was close enough that he could smell her. a scent like rain on hot stone and ozone. He looked up into her 4 eyes and felt a strange, disorienting pull. She was dangerous. She was the enemy, and she was the most stunning thing he had ever seen. He swallowed hard. Leora saw his pupils dilate. She saw the flush of blood rise in his neck. Her sensors picked up the spike in his heart rate. It wasn't fear. It was attraction? Her own markings flared a bright, inquisitive gold before she could stop them. She felt a heat rise in her chest, a biological response to his proximity that she hadn't authorized. He was a barbarian, a primitive. Yet there was a symmetry to his face, a fire in his spirit that the sterile, polished men of the Concord lacked. She stepped back, flustered. The gold faded to a neutral gray. "We will continue this later," she said, her voice tight. "You will remain here. If you attempt to escape, the gravity field will crush you. Do you understand?" "I understand," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave. "Hard to miss the point." Leora turned and walked to the wall, which dissolved to let her pass. She paused at the threshold, looking back at him. "You are not dead yet." "Captain Ward," she said, "do not give me a reason to change that. I will try to keep my charm to a minimum," Elias said. She left. The wall reformed. Elias let out a long breath and slumped against the force field, sliding down to the floor. "God, we are in so much trouble," he whispered to the empty room, in the corridor. Leora leaned against the cool, crystalline surface of the wall. She closed all 4 of her eyes for a moment, centering her breathing, forcing her bioluminescence to stabilize. She had meant to dissect him intellectually. Instead, she felt as though he had been the one studying her. His anger was so raw, yet his control, the way he used humor as a shield, was a sophisticated psychological defense she hadn't expected from a brute. Humans. They were messy. They were loud. They were dangerous. But they were not boring. Leora opened her eyes and pushed off the wall. She had to report to Karen. She had to spin this encounter, convince the council that the human was a valuable asset, not a rabid dog to be put down. As she turned the corner, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was an envoy of the Celestine Order. He wore robes of absolute black, a fabric that seemed to absorb the light around it. His face was hidden behind a mask of silver porcelain, featureless save for a single vertical slit. "Scion Zel Shai," the envoy said. His voice did not sound like it came from a throat. It sounded like it was whispered directly into her auditory nerve. "Envoy," Leora said, bowing her head slightly. The Celestine Order was the spiritual and intelligence arm of the Concord, feared even by the High Council. "You find the specimen interesting," the envoy stated. It was not a question. "He is complex," Leora replied carefully. "Do not be intrigued. Scion," the envoy warned. "The Order has watched the threads of probability, and these newcomers are a catalyst. They bring fire." "Then we should extinguish them?" Leora asked. The envoy tilted his head. "No. Fire can be useful. If one controls the fuel, study him, break him, but do not get attached to the specimens. Leora Zel Shai. Things that burn often consume those who hold them too close." The envoy dissolved into the shadows, leaving Leora standing alone in the bright, humming silence of the station. She looked back toward the cell block, her tattoos pulsing a slow, thoughtful purple. She feared the envoy was right. But as she remembered the defiant spark in Elias Ward's eyes, she realized she was already walking into the fire. The atmosphere in the High Concord chamber was usually one of sterile deliberation. a place where the fate of star systems was decided with the dispassionate calculus of a spreadsheet. Today, however, the air tasted of ozone and fear. The chamber was a vast amphitheater of floating obsidian platforms, suspended in a magnetic field that hummed with a low, bone-shaking frequency. Light filtered in from the triple suns of the Aurelian system, casting long, fractured shadows across the faces of the 12 high counselors. High Strategos. Karen stood at the center of the debate, his robes of office shimmering with the iridescent weave of the ruling caste. His bioluminescent markings, usually a serene azure, were pulsing a deep, agitated violet. "The Dominion cannot know," Karen announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "If the rival superpower learns that a wormhole has stabilized in our backyard, a wormhole leading to a resource-hungry militaristic species, they will not see a threat. They will see a beachhead. They will invade the Aurelian sector to seize the gate for themselves." Councillor Vrex, the hawkish representative of the Outer Rim manufacturing guilds, leaned forward on his podium. "Then let us destroy the gate," Vrex spat, "collapse the singularity, crush the human ships. We wash our hands of this filth before the galaxy catches the scent. And lose the only stable bridge to a new galaxy?" A third counselor argued. "The energy potential alone is worth 1,000 fleets." In the shadows of the upper tier, where the light of the suns did not reach, the observer from the Celestine Order watched. He did not speak. He did not need to. The Order's influence was not in shouting, but in whispering. He tapped a subtle rhythm on his wrist comms, sending a coded signal to the media nodes embedded in the Concord's information network. "Fear," the signal suggested. "Amplify the fear. Down on the floor." Karen turned his gaze to the empty podium where Leora usually stood. "She is wasting time," he muttered to his aide. "She plays with the creature when she should be dissecting it." In the White Room, time had become a fluid concept. Elias Ward sat on the floor, his back against the invisible force field. He had been awake for what felt like 2 days, kept conscious by the hum of the containment field and the adrenaline that refused to fade. Leora paced in front of him. She had been asking the same question for 3 hours, phrasing it differently each time, probing for a slip. "Tell me about the gravimetric stabilizers on your flagship," she said, her tone clinically bored. "Our scans indicate your hull should have been crushed by the tidal forces of the entry. Yet, you survived. How did you compensate for the shear?" Elias rubbed his face with both hands, groaning. "I told you, Scion, we used a randomized polarity shift. We guessed. It is called luck. You guys have a word for luck. Or is that too scientifically inaccurate for you?" "Luck is a statistical anomaly," Leora said, stopping to look down at him. "It is not a strategy. It is when you are human," Elias retorted. "Look, are you going to feed me, or is starvation part of the interrogation package? Because my stomach is making noises that could be interpreted as a declaration of war." Leora tapped her datapad, dispensing a nutrient cube from a slot in the wall. It was a gelatinous blue cube that smelled like mint and copper. "Eat," she commanded. Elias caught the cube and looked at it skeptically. "If this turns me into a newt, I am suing." Leora tilted her head, her upper eyes narrowing. "A newt? A small amphibian? Why would you become one? And in what court would you sue? You are an unlawful combatant." "It is a joke." "Leora," Elias said, taking a bite and grimacing. "Not bad. Tastes like gym socks, but nutritious gym socks." Leora watched him chew. She found his resilience irritating. Most species, when isolated and surrounded by superior technology, crumbled into despair or obsequious begging within 10 hours. Elias Ward merely became more sarcastic. It was a defense mechanism, she knew, but it was a remarkably durable one. We are dead in the water if we do not get those stabilizers fixed, Elias mumbled, half to himself, thinking about his ship. Leora stiffened, her markings flashing a confused yellow. Dead in the water? You are in a vacuum. There is no water. And if you are dead, how can you repair the stabilizers? Elias paused, swallowing the blue cube. It is an idiom. It means we are stuck, helpless, like a ship with no engine floating in the ocean. Ocean, Leora repeated, testing the word, a planetary body of water. You use nautical metaphors for space travel. How quaint. We are a sentimental species, Elias said. We hold on to things, like grudges and hope. And your ass, Leora added. Elias choked. Excuse me, you said earlier. Leora recited from her memory of their previous session that your ass is on the line. I have analyzed your anatomy. Your posterior seems integral to your locomotion, but I fail to see how placing it on a line, presumably a tether, would aid in your tactical situation. Elias stared at her for a long 5 seconds. Then, he threw his head back and laughed. It was a rasping, tired sound, but it was genuine. God, you are literal, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. It means I am in danger. My reputation, my command, my life. It is all at risk. Leora did not laugh. She watched the way the muscles in his neck moved, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. She felt a strange flutter in her chest, a disruption in her own rhythm. It is an inefficient way to communicate, she said, her voice softer than she intended, but expressive. She turned back to the holographic display of the human fleet. I need to know about your projectile weapons. Elias, the kinetic force is crude, but the delivery system is rapid. High Strategos Karen believes you have more of them hidden in the wormhole. Karen is a paranoid old ghost, Elias said, leaning his head back against the wall. We brought everything we had. We are explorers. Leora, we carry guns because we are afraid of what is out there, not because we want to conquer it. Your architecture suggests otherwise, Leora countered. Your ships are built like bunkers, and your station looks like a luxury spa designed by a jellyfish. Elias shot back. Leora blinked. A jellyfish? A Nidarian? Yes, translucent, floaty, lots of stinging tentacles. Elias gestured around the room. It is beautiful. Do not get me wrong, but it does not look like it was built by anyone who has ever had to worry about a micrometeorite. Leora looked at the crystalline walls of the interrogation chamber. She had always seen them as the pinnacle of Zalari aesthetic, form following the function of light. But seeing it through his eyes, it did seem fragile, exposed. We rely on shields, she said defensively. Until the shields fail, Elias said quietly, then you are just glass waiting to shatter. Aboard the Zalari detention station, in a lower sector designated for hazardous biological containment, the crew of the Dauntless were not discussing architecture. They were discussing mutiny. Commander Rodriguez paced the small holding cell. 30 members of the bridge crew were crammed into a space designed for 10, sleeping on gravity pads that hummed constantly. He sold us out, Lieutenant Chen whispered, huddled in the corner. He gave himself up, and now we are rotting here. He bought us time, Rodriguez snapped, turning on her. We were outgunned 10-1. If the captain hadn't surrendered, we would be debris. Or maybe he is cutting a deal, a security officer muttered, saving his own skin. He is cozying up to the blue giants while we eat nutrient paste. He is doing what he has to do, Rodriguez insisted, though her own doubt was a cold knot in her stomach. Elias Ward does not break. Leora stood in the medical analysis lab, watching a stream of data scroll across the hollow table. The medical director, a Zalari named Haxor whose skin was a pale, sickly green, looked nervous. The results are unusual. Scion, Haxor said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Show me, Leora commanded. Haxor expanded the projection. It showed a simulation of a human nervous system overlaid with a Zalari one. We assumed the humans were biologically incompatible with us, Haxor explained. They are carbon-based, yes, but their evolution is chaotic. However, look at the neurochemical receptors, specifically dopamine and oxytocin in the human, and the serotonin analogs in the Zalari. The two systems in the simulation pulsed. Where they touched, they did not reject each other. They synchronized. They interface. Leora whispered, "It is more than interface. Scion. It is resonance. If a human and a Zalari were to engage in prolonged physical contact, the bioelectric fields would create a feedback loop. It would be distinct, intense. It suggests a common evolutionary ancestor, perhaps millions of years ago, seeded by the progenitors." "Does Karen know?" Leora asked sharply. "Not yet. I thought it prudent to inform you first." "Delete it," Leora said. "Scion, delete the simulation. Encrypt the raw data to my personal clearance. If the High Council learns that we are biologically compatible with the invaders, they will not see it as a reason for peace. They will see it as a contamination risk. They will sterilize them." Haxor hesitated, then bowed. "As you command." Leora left the lab, her heart hammering. She felt dirty, complicit. She was hiding the truth to protect the enemy. No, not the enemy. To protect Elias. The realization terrified her. She returned to the interrogation block. The station was currently in a sleep cycle. The lights dimmed to a twilight blue. She needed to ask Elias about the wormhole coordinates again. But really, she just wanted to see if he was still making jokes. She entered the cell. Elias was asleep, curled on his side. He looked younger when he wasn't frowning. Leora stepped closer, deactivating the audio sensors for a moment of privacy. She reached out, her hand hovering inches from the force field that separated them. Suddenly, the station lurched. A siren wailed, a high, piercing shriek. The gravity generator in the floor gave a sickening lurch, then failed completely. The localized gravity field pinning Elias to the floor vanished. He woke up with a shout as he floated upward, weightless. At the same moment, the inertial dampeners offline, throwing him across the room like a rag doll. He slammed toward Leora. Reflex took over. Leora didn't step back. She deactivated the force field and threw up her hands, generating a personal kinetic bubble to catch him. He hit her not with a thud, but with a soft collision of fields. Her arms wrapped around him to stabilize them both in the zero-G environment. They were drifting in the center of the white room, legs tangled, chests pressed together. "You okay?" Elias gasped, his hands gripping her shoulders. His grip was strong, warm, and terrifyingly solid. Leora couldn't speak. The medical simulation she had just seen wasn't theoretical anymore. Where his skin touched hers, even through the thin fabric of his flight suit and her silk robes, she felt a jolt. It wasn't an electric shock. It was a hum, a resonance. Her bioluminescence flared, not in the controlled patterns of her caste, but in a wild, chaotic riot of gold, teal, and crimson. Elias froze. He looked at her face, inches from his own. He saw her pupils dilate until her eyes were almost entirely black pools. He felt the heat radiating from her. a feverish warmth that seemed to seep into his own bones. "Your lights," Elias whispered. "They are bright." Leora felt a rush of desire so potent it made her knees weak, even in zero gravity. It was a biological imperative, a chemical command that screamed match. It was the soft weakness her tutors had warned her about, the primitive drive that logic was supposed to conquer. She looked at his mouth. She wondered, with a sudden, desperate curiosity, what he tasted like. "You are heavy," she managed to say, her voice trembling, even without gravity. "You are heavy." Elias didn't let go. He looked at her markings, watching the colors swirl. He felt the same pull, a magnetic drag in his chest. It wasn't just fear or adrenaline. It was recognition. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice low. "Why does it feel like the air just got thin?" Leora shoved him away. It took every ounce of her willpower. She pushed off his chest, sending him drifting back toward the wall as the station's emergency gravity kicked back in. They both fell to the floor, landing hard. "Stay back," Leora ordered, scrambling to her feet. She reactivated the force field between them with a trembling hand. Elias sat up, rubbing his elbow. He looked at her, his expression dazed. "Leora." "Do not speak," she hissed. Her tattoos were slowly fading back to a distressed indigo. "That was a malfunction. A sensory overlap." Elias stood up slowly. He walked to the barrier. He didn't look convinced. That didn't feel like a malfunction. That felt like chemistry. Leora turned her back on him. "I will return when the station is stabilized. Do not touch the barrier." She fled the room. She didn't walk. She marched, forcing her breathing to slow, forcing the gold to fade from her skin, but her hands were shaking. The crisis that had caused the gravity failure was not an accident. 2 hours later, the Galactic news feeds were burning. Leora stood in Karen's office, watching the footage. It was grainy, shot from a colony security camera on the moon of Vestra, a mining outpost in the Aurelian border zone. The video showed ships. They were gray, blocky, and angular, unmistakably human in design. They were strafing the mining domes, their cannons flashing with the distinct yellow muzzle flare of chemical projectile weapons. The audio was a recording of screams and the jagged, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of ballistic impacts. The headline scrolling beneath the carnage was in massive red Zellari glyphs: "Invaders strike Vestra, thousands dead." Another feed showed a counselor, one of the Celestine puppets, shouting into a microphone, "Humans wandered into a galactic power and now they are fighting for everything. They are not explorers. They are locusts." "It is a massacre," Karen said, his back to Leora. He was looking out the window at the shipyard. Leora studied the footage. She zoomed in on the weapon impacts. "Look at the cratering. High strategos," she said, pointing. "Kinetic rounds shatter rock. They create dust. These impacts, look at the scorch marks. There is thermal residue." "So," Karen said dismissively, "they use explosive rounds. Human explosive rounds use chemical propellants," Leora argued. "This thermal signature matches a plasma disruptor masked as a kinetic impact. And the flight path of those ships. Look at the turn radius. No human pilot could survive those G-forces. The ships are drones." "You are seeing what you want to see," Karen snapped, turning to face her. His face was hard, his eyes cold. "You are compromised, Scion. I have seen the logs of your interrogation sessions. You trade jokes with the butcher. You let him charm you. I am analyzing the enemy," Leora protested. "The enemy just slaughtered 3,000 miners." Karen roared. He slammed his hand on his desk. "The Council has voted. The Dominion has been notified of the threat. We are mobilizing the fleet. We will burn the human task force, and then we will collapse the wormhole. No! Leora gasped. You cannot condemn an entire species based on evidence. Karen cut her off. Go back to the prisoners to get the location of their homeworld. If we have to go through that gate to end this, we will need targets. Leora stared at him. This was wrong. It was too fast, too convenient. As you command, she said icily. She stormed into Elias's cell. She didn't bother with the force field. She walked right up to him. He was pacing, having sensed the shift in the station's mood. Did you do it? She demanded. Elias stopped. Do what? Did you order a strike on Vestra? Did you have ships hidden in the asteroid belt? What? No! Elias looked genuinely confused. Vestra? I do not even know where that is. We have 3 ships. Leora. 1 is dead. 2 are captured. We do not have a secret fleet. Leora activated the holoprojector in the room. The footage of the massacre played in the air between them. The screams filled the small white room. Elias watched, his face draining of color. He saw the gray ships. He saw the guns firing. That is, those look like our ships, he whispered. But they are moving wrong. They are killing civilians, Leora said, her voice trembling with rage and betrayal. Is this your strategy? Feign surrender while your drones attack our borders? I swear to you, Elias said, stepping through the hologram to face her. He didn't care about the image flickering over his skin. I did not order this. Humans did not do this. Look at the muzzle flashes. They are too bright, too clean. That is not gunpowder. That is a fake. Leora looked into his eyes. She used every minute of her training as an interrogator. She looked for the micro-twitches of a lie, the shift in pupil size, the change in respiration. She saw only horror and fear, not for himself, but for what this meant. Someone is framing us, Elias said, his voice cracking. Someone wants a war. Who? Leora asked. Who benefits from a war with a species that has nothing? Someone who wants to scare your people, Elias said. Someone who wants to consolidate power. We did it on Earth all the time. A false flag. You create a monster so you can be the savior who kills it. Leora thought of the Celestine envoy. Fire can be useful if one controls the fuel. She stepped back, the anger draining out of her, replaced by a cold dread. If you are telling the truth, she whispered, then my government is lying to its own people. And if you do not believe me, Elias said, stepping closer, then my crew is dead, and Earth is next. He reached out tentatively and took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. The contact was electric, grounding. Leora, he said, using her name without the title for the first time, I have seen war. I have command scars on my back and ghosts in my head. I did not come 1 billion miles to start a fire. I came to keep my people alive. Please. You have to believe me. Leora looked at their joined hands, his pale, scarred skin against her luminous indigo. It was a forbidden image, a treasonous image, and it was the only thing that felt real. I believe you, she said softly. She pulled her hand away, but the connection remained. My superiors are preparing a strike, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. They want your homeworld coordinates. I have to give them something. Give them the coordinates of the wormhole event horizon, Elias said. Tell them it is a defensive grid. It will buy us time. And then you need to find out who is really flying those ships, Elias said. Leora nodded. She walked to the door. Where are you going? Elias asked. I am going to commit treason, Leora said. She exited the cell. She didn't go to her quarters. She went to the lower data stacks, the restricted archives that required a high Strategos's clearance. She didn't have that clearance, but she knew Karen's encryption cipher. She had seen him enter it 1,000 times. She stood before the terminal in the dark server room, the cooling fans humming around her. Her hands hovered over the interface. If she did this, there was no going back. She would be an outcast, a traitor to the Concord. She would lose her family name, her status, her life. She thought of the way Elias looked at her. She thought of the soft weakness that was actually strength. Leora Zelshai began to type. The digital archives of the High Concord were a labyrinth of light and silence. Leora sat in the deepest recess of the data stacks, illuminated only by the frantic scroll of holographic code reflecting in her 4 eyes. It was the middle of the station's sleep cycle. The corridors were empty, save for the hum of the maintenance drones. She was looking for a ghost. The official report on the Vestra massacre claimed the attacking ships had emerged from a blind spot in the asteroid belt, utilizing primitive chemical thrusters to evade detection. But the sensor logs didn't add up. The reaction times were too fast. The formation flying was too perfect. Leora isolated the transponder ghost data, the faint digital echo that every engine core left on the background radiation of space. She stripped away the layers of noise, the clumsy spoofing that was meant to look like human incompetence. Beneath the static, she found a pulse. It wasn't the chaotic, dirty signature of a human fusion drive. It was a harmonic frequency, a Concord frequency. She froze. The attacking ships weren't human. They were Zalari automated drones, retrofit with kinetic cannons to mimic the human style. And the command codes. Leora traced the authorization key. It didn't lead to a rogue pirate or a Dominion infiltrator. It routed through a series of shell nodes, bouncing across the galaxy, until it terminated in a secure server block. Sector 7, the Celestine Order. Leora sat back, her breath hitching in her throat. The Celestine Order was not just a religious faction. They were the guardians of Zalari purity, the shadow hand that guided the council. If they were engineering this, it meant the war wasn't a mistake. It was a manufacturing project. She felt a wave of nausea. Her entire life, her education, her rank as a scion, it was all built on the belief that the Concord was the pinnacle of order and justice. To see the corruption this deep, rotting the very core of her civilization, felt like a physical blow. She needed to be sure. She needed a second opinion from the only person who knew the enemy better than she did. The interrogation room was dark when Leora entered. She didn't turn on the main lights. She activated a tactical table in the center of the room, bathing Elias's sleeping form in a harsh blue glow. He woke instantly, rolling to his feet, eyes scanning for a threat. When he saw her, he relaxed, but only slightly. "Late night, Scion?" Elias asked, rubbing the sleep from his face. "Or are you just checking to see if I turn into a werewolf under the artificial moonlight?" "I have data," Leora said, her voice tight. "I need you to analyze it." Elias walked over to the table. Leora queued up the footage of the Vestra attack, but this time she layered her own findings over it. The trajectory analysis, the engine signatures. "Look at this maneuver," she said, pointing to a moment where the human ships executed a 90-degree turn. "If you were commanding this squadron, why would you do that?" Elias studied the holographic ships. "I wouldn't. That is a pincer movement, sure, but look at the G-force. A human pilot would black out. Those ships are pulling 12 Gs in a vacuum turn. Our dampeners are good, Leora, but they are not that good. And here?" Leora pointed to the targeting pattern. They are targeting the comms arrays first, Elias noted. That is smart, but it is precise, too precise. Human doctrine is messy. We saturate the area. These guys are sniping antennas from orbit while moving at Mach 10. It is robotic. It is acting, Elias concluded, looking up at her. It is someone trying to look like a drunk human, but they are too sober to pull it off. Leora deactivated the table. The blue light vanished, leaving them in the dim ambient glow of the corridor spillover. You are right, she whispered. Elias saw the way her shoulders slumped. He saw the dull gray cast of her bioluminescence. He had seen soldiers look like that after their first friendly fire incident. It was the look of a worldview cracking open. It is your people, isn't it? Elias asked softly. It is a faction, Leora admitted. The Celestine Order. They are. They believe that conflict is necessary to purify the species. That peace makes us weak. They are using you as the catalyst to militarize the Concord. Elias let out a low whistle. So we are just the convenient boogeyman? Yes. And if I expose them, you will be destroyed. Elias finished. I will be unmade, Leora corrected. They will strip my name. They will erase my lineage. In Zalari culture, to be nameless is worse than death. It is to be forgotten. She turned away from him, hugging her arms around herself. I am scared, Elias. I have spent my life climbing the ladder, proving that I was worthy of my bloodline. I believed we were the light of the galaxy. And now, I am standing in the dark. Elias moved around the table. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel his heat. I know the feeling, he said. During the Unification Wars, I was a lieutenant. We were ordered to fire on a civilian transport that was running a blockade. Command said it was carrying weapons. Did you fire? Leora asked, looking at him over her shoulder. No. I jammed my own ship's targeting computer. My captain nearly court-martialed me. I lost my promotion track for 5 years. They called me a coward. And the transport? It was full of refugees and kids. If I had fired... Elias shook his head. Sometimes, Leora. The institution is wrong, and loyalty to a lie isn't honor. It is just complicity. Leora looked at him. He was an alien, a barbarian, a prisoner, and he understood her better than anyone in the High Council. The next cycle was a blur of political maneuvering. The news feeds were screaming for retribution. The Council was drafting a declaration of war. Leora spent the day dodging Karen's questions, pretending to be the loyal soldier while her mind raced for a solution. By the evening, the pressure was suffocating. She needed to breathe. She needed to escape, even if just for an hour. She went to Elias's cell. Come with me, she said. Where? To the execution chamber? To the garden. She led him through the station, using her override codes to bypass the security checkpoints. They arrived at a sealed door marked Biodome 4 Sensory Meditation. The doors slid open and Elias gasped. It wasn't a garden in the human sense. There was no dirt, no grass. Instead, the room was a sphere of zero gravity. Floating in the air were globes of water, ranging from the size of a marble to the size of a house. Bioluminescent plants, like glowing coral, drifted in the currents of air. The light was soft, shifting through a spectrum of calming pastels. It is... Wow, Elias said. It is a sensory deprivation and restoration chamber, Leora explained, pushing off the floor and drifting upward. We come here to synchronize our internal rhythms. Elias kicked off the ground, awkwardly flailing until he grabbed a handhold on a floating piece of coral structure. It is like swimming in air. Leora moved with the grace of a creature born for this environment. She drifted near a large sphere of water, her robes rippling around her like fins. For a while, they just floated. The silence of the room was heavy but not oppressive. It was a refuge. "So," Elias said, spinning slowly upside down, "do you guys have weekends? Or is it just constant plotting and meditating?" "We have cycles of rest," Leora said, smiling faintly. "But leisure is considered unproductive. We focus on art, philosophy, strategy. Sounds exhausting. On Earth, we have this thing called doing nothing. You sit on a couch, you drink a fermented grain beverage, and you watch other people play sports. It is glorious." "It sounds like stagnation," Leora teased. "It is recharging," Elias countered. He drifted closer to her. "You should try it. You carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders." "Scion, it is going to break your back." Leora looked at him. He was only a few feet away now. In the soft, fractal light, the scars on his face looked less like wounds and more like a map of where he had been. "I cannot put it down," she whispered. "If I do, people die." "Maybe you don't have to carry it alone," Elias said. He reached out. It was a tentative gesture, his hand floating in the space between them. Leora stared at his hand. She knew the medical data. She knew the danger. But in this room, with the world locked outside, the logic seemed distant. She reached out. Her fingertips brushed his. The reaction was instantaneous. It wasn't a spark, it was a flood. Leora gasped as a rush of sensory data hit her cortex. She didn't just feel his skin, she felt his memory. She saw a flash of a blue sky over a gray ocean. She smelled salt and engine grease. She felt a profound, aching loneliness that matched her own. Elias jerked, his eyes widening. He felt it too. A kaleidoscope of violet light, the taste of ozone, a feeling of immense crushing pressure and the desperate need to be perfect. They didn't pull away. The connection was addictive. It was the most intimate thing either of them had ever felt. Elias's hand closed around hers. He pulled her gently toward him. The momentum brought them together in a slow-motion collision. Leora's bioluminescence flared, not with the agitated colors of stress, but with a blinding, pure white light that illuminated the entire chamber. Her heart was hammering against his chest. "Leora," Elias breathed. His voice sounded like it was coming from inside her own head. They stared at each other, suspended in the air, surrounded by floating water. The air between them was thick with a tension that was terrifying and electric. It wasn't just biology, it was a recognition of souls. Two lonely captains drifting in the dark, finding a tether. Elias's other hand came up to cup her face. His thumb brushed the markings on her cheek. Leora leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering shut. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to merge with him. She wanted to forget that they were enemies. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. He leaned in. Their breath mingled. Then, reality crashed back in. Leora's eyes snapped open. She realized what she was doing. She was fraternizing with a prisoner. She was compromising her judgment. She was falling in love with a variable in a war equation. She pushed him back. "No," she gasped, spinning away from him. "We cannot." Elias drifted back, looking dazed. "Leora, wait, it is not just, it is forbidden," Leora cried, her voice echoing in the sphere. "If the Order knew, if they saw this, they would use it. They would say you corrupted me. They would kill you to cleanse me." She hugged herself, her light dimming to a fearful gray. "We cannot do this. Not while we are on opposite sides of a gun." Elias stabilized himself against a water sphere. Then we need to stop the gun from firing. The respite didn't last. The next morning, the station shook with a real explosion. An antimatter charge detonated in the lower docking ring. It was a small blast, tactical, but it vented a maintenance section to space. 12 Zalari engineers were lost. Within minutes, security was swarming the station, and within the hour, evidence was found, a human-made timing device, allegedly smuggled in by the prisoners. Leora was summoned to Karen's office. The high strategos was standing by the window, watching the repair drone swarm the damaged hull. "It seems your pets are biting the hand that feeds them," Karen said, his voice cold. "It is a setup," Leora said immediately. "How would they smuggle a device? They were stripped, scanned. This is the order. Karen, you know it is." Karen turned. His face was a mask of stone. "Careful. Scion, you are speaking of things you do not understand." "I understand that we are manufacturing a war," Leora shouted, losing her composure. "Enough," Karen roared. "The council has decided the human prisoners are a security risk. They are to be transferred to the Obsidian site for enhanced extraction. We will peel their minds apart until we find their weakness. And then we will burn their fleet." Leora felt the blood drain from her face. The Obsidian site was a black hole. No one came back from there intact. It was a torture facility. "When?" she asked, her voice hollow. "1 hour. Prepare the prisoner for transport." Leora stared at him. She realized then that Karen wasn't just a traditionalist. He was one of them. He was order. He was threatening her. "Obey, or you are next. As you command." "High strategos," Leora said. She bowed perfectly. She turned and walked out. She didn't go to the prisoner block. She went to the flight control deck. Leora Zelshai had spent her life following the rules. She had been the perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect scion. She had believed that the rules protected the galaxy from chaos, but the rules were a lie, and the only truth she had left was a human captain with a crooked smile and a conscience. She accessed the logistics manifest. There was a small cruiser, the Ethel Guard, scheduled for a weapons calibration run in the outer sector. It was fully fueled. She altered the crew manifest. She reassigned herself as the commanding officer, and she added a special cargo transfer order. Priority asset, Captain Elias Ward and Human Liaison Team. She marked it as a field test, a classified mission to test human obedience in a tactical environment. It was a thin lie. It would hold for maybe 6 hours before Karen saw through it. 6 hours was all she needed to reach the border. She arrived at the cells with a squad of guards she knew were loyal to the fleet, not the order. "Get them up," Leora ordered. "We are moving." Elias looked at her from the floor. He saw the tension in her jaw, the way her lights were fixed in a hard, determined white. "Where are we going?" he asked as the guards hauled him up. "To the black site?" "No," Leora said, meeting his eyes. "We are going for a ride." She marched them to the docking bay. The Ethel Guard was waiting, a sleek predator of a ship. Leora hurried them aboard, her heart pounding in her throat like a war drum. As the airlock hissed shut, sealing them inside, she let out a breath she felt she had been holding for days. "Bridge. This is Scion Zelshai," she said into her comms. "Initiate launch sequence. Priority Alpha 1. Get us out of here." The ship shuddered as it detached from the station. Elias stood beside her on the small command deck, watching the massive station recede. "You just kidnapped us, didn't you?" Elias asked. "I just saved your life," Leora corrected. "And mine. Where are we going?" "To the neutral zone," Leora said. staring at the star field. To the edge of the Dominion space, we are going to broadcast the truth. We are going to show the galaxy that the Celestine Order is lying. Elias looked at her. He reached out and squeezed her hand, brief and hard. That sounds like a plan. A terrible, dangerous plan. But a plan. They entered FTL. The stars streaked into lines of light, but deep in the engineering deck of the Ethelgard, in the shadows behind the warp core. A crewman wearing the signet ring of the Celestine Order tapped a message into a secure pad. The traitor has run. The trap is set. Prepare the intercept. Leora thought she was escaping. She didn't know she was flying a tomb. The interior of the Ethelgard was not designed for comfort. It was a rapid response cruiser, a dagger of a ship built for speed and violence, not for diplomacy or cross-species cohabitation. The corridors were narrow, paneled in the same shimmering semi-organic polymer as the capital station. But here the lights were harsh and the air recycling systems hummed with an aggressive, mechanical thrum. For the 12 humans and 30 Zalari crammed aboard, it was a pressure cooker. Captain Elias Ward stood in the mess hall, staring at a plate of translucent, wobbling violet jelly. Across the table, his comms officer, Lieutenant Chen, looked equally skeptical. "It is sheer protein," a Zalari crewman named Hylas said, his mandibles clicking in what Elias had learned was a sign of amusement. "It is optimized for metabolic efficiency. It wiggles." "Hylas," Elias said, poking the cube with a spork. "Food should not have a defensive reflex. On Earth, if your dinner moves, you shoot it again." Hylas tilted his head, his secondary eyes blinking. "You require dead matter for sustenance. It is barbaric and it is delicious," Elias corrected. The tension was not just culinary. It was in the air, thick and static. The Zalari crew, loyal to the fleet but wary of the primitives, moved with fluid, silent grace, while the humans clomped around in heavy magnetic boots, loud and clumsy in the delicate gravity. Privacy was another battlefield. The Zalari had no concept of closed doors. Their society relied on communal transparency. Elias had to post a guard outside the human sleeping quarters just to prevent curious engineers from walking in to watch them sleep. Leora walked into the mess hall. The chatter died instantly. She wore a severe, high-collared uniform of dark command weave. Her bioluminescence dimmed to a strict, authoritarian slate gray. She looked every inch the scion, cold and untouchable. "Captain Ward," she said, her voice crisp, a word. Elias stood, abandoning his jelly. "Lead the way, scion." They walked in silence until they reached the navigation alcove, a small blister of transparency on the ship's hull. It was the only place where the hum of the engines faded to a dull vibration. As soon as the door hissed shut, Leora's posture collapsed. She leaned against the bulkhead, letting out a long, shaky breath. The gray on her skin shifted to a tired, bruising purple. "Are you holding up?" Elias asked, keeping his distance but dropping his voice to a murmur. "My crew is restless," Leora said, rubbing her temples. "They do not understand why we are running a calibration test in deep space with a squad of alien prisoners. They suspect I am compromised." "You are compromised," Elias reminded her gently. "You just kidnapped a bunch of monkeys and stole a warship." "I am saving the conquered," Leora snapped, though the fire in her voice lacked heat. "If we can reach the neutral zone, if we can get a signal out, we will," Elias said. "We are ghosts right now. No one knows where we are." Leora looked out at the streaking starlight. "The Celestine Order knows. They have eyes everywhere. Every time I look at my own bridge crew, I wonder which one of them is waiting to put a knife in my back." Elias moved closer. He wanted to touch her shoulder, to offer the physical comfort that humans gave so freely. But he held back. The air between them was already charged, a magnetic pull that terrified him. Trust your instincts. Leora, you got us this far. My instincts tell me I am a traitor, she whispered, and that I am leading us all into a grave. The grave tried to claim them 4 hours later. Elias was in the engineering crawlspace, trying to explain the concept of percussive maintenance to a baffled Zalari technician, when the proximity alarm screamed. It wasn't an external threat, it was internal. A localized explosion ripped through the tertiary coolant manifold. The ship lurched violently, throwing Elias against a conduit. The air filled instantly with freezing mist and the acrid smell of ozone. "Seal the bulkheads," a voice roared over the comms. Elias scrambled up, coughing. The blast had severed the automated control lines. The coolant was venting into the main drive core. If it hit the fusion reaction, the ethyl guard would become a very small, very bright supernova. "I need a manual override on Junction 4, the chief engineer shouted. "I am on it," Elias yelled back. He dragged himself through the smoke, his eyes stinging. He reached the junction access ladder, only to find someone else already there. Leora. She had been inspecting the drive core when the blast hit. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, revealing a patch of indigo skin that was flashing a frantic, warning red. "Get back! Elias!" She coughed, trying to turn the massive manual valve wheel. "It is jammed." Elias didn't retreat. He climbed up beside her, the shaft barely wide enough for one, let alone two. The heat was rising rapidly as the containment fields flickered. "Grab the left side," he ordered, jamming his shoulder against the metal. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They heaved together. Human muscle and Zalari leverage strained against the warped metal. The valve groaned, screeched, and then turned. "Keep going," Elias gritted out, sweat stinging his eyes. They spun the wheel, shutting off the flow of volatile coolant just as the temperature gauge redlined. The roaring hiss of escaping gas died down to a whimper. The emergency lights bathed them in a pulsing, bloody crimson. They collapsed against the grating, chests heaving, tangled together in the cramped space. Elias was covered in soot. Leora was slick with coolant fluid that shimmered on her skin. "That," Elias panted, wiping his face, "was not an accident." Leora stared at the valve. "No, a booby trap. Someone rigged the pressure sensor." "We have a saboteur," Elias said, his voice hardening. "I told you, Leora, you cannot play nice with these people. You need to lock down the ship. I cannot treat my crew like criminals." Leora shot back, turning to face him. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown black with adrenaline. "If I turn on them, I prove the order right. I become the tyrant. You are already the traitor," Elias shouted, the stress breaking his filter. "Wake up, Scion, they are trying to kill us. They do not care about your honor. They care about winning. You are still trying to play by the rules of a game that does not exist anymore. Do not lecture me on rules, Captain." Leora pushed herself up, her face inches from his. "You think this is easy? You think betraying everything I am is a tactical maneuver? I am tearing my life apart for you, for your people, for me," Elias challenged, "or for your own conscience." "For you," Leora screamed. The silence that followed was louder than the explosion. Leora froze, her breath catching. The words hung in the damp, hot air between them. Her markings, which had been flashing red with anger, suddenly shifted. The red bled away, replaced by a soft, vulnerable gold that pulsed in time with her racing heart. Elias stared at her. He saw the soot on her cheek, the terror in her eyes, and the undeniable, terrifying truth of what she had just said. He looked at her mouth. He couldn't help it. Leora saw his gaze drop. She felt that same dangerous magnetic pull she had felt in the sensory garden. But here, in the dirt and the dark, it was raw. It wasn't intellectual. It was survival. "Why do you think I am here, Elias?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why do you think I let you live?" Elias didn't answer with words. He reached out, his hand shaking slightly, and cupped her jaw. Her skin was cool to the touch, smooth as polished stone, but beneath it, he could feel the heat of her life force. "I have been trying so hard not to want you," he murmured. Leora let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "I have failed at that," she admitted. She leaned in. The kiss was clumsy at first, a collision of desperation. He tasted of dust and salt. She tasted of rain and electricity. But then, the connection took over. The neurochemical interface that the medical officer had warned her about flared to life. It was an explosion of sensation. Leora gasped against his mouth as she felt his emotions flood her mind. His fear of losing her, his fierce protectiveness, the deep, aching desire he had buried under layers of sarcasm. And he felt hers, the terrifying freedom of breaking the rules, the sheer, overwhelming need to be known, to be seen, not as a scion, but as Leora. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. His arms wrapped around her waist, crushing her against him as if he could shield her from the universe with his own body. In the red emergency light, her bioluminescence went wild. Patterns of brilliant teal, gold, and white swirled across her skin, lighting up the cramped shaft like a nebula. She didn't try to control it. She couldn't. She surrendered to it. They sank down onto the grating, the danger of the ship forgotten, the politics of the galaxy suspended. There was only the heat of their bodies, the friction of skin against skin, and the desperate, defiant act of finding love in a war zone. Later, the silence was different. It wasn't tense. It was heavy with complication. They sat side by side in the dark, shoulders touching. Leora was hugging her knees, her markings fading to a soft, contemplative blue. Elias was staring at his hands, as if surprised they still belonged to him. "I have violated 36 regulations," Leora whispered. "Fraternization with a prisoner, compromising a diplomatic asset, biological contamination." "Is that what I am?" Elias asked softly. "A contamination?" Leora turned to him. Her eyes were wet. "You are the only clean thing in this entire galaxy. Elias." She buried her face in her hands. "But I am afraid. I have let my emotions dictate my strategy. That is the first step to failure." Elias reached over and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "No. That is what the order tells you to keep you obedient. They tell you that feeling makes you weak. But look at us. We just saved the ship. We are still alive." He squeezed her fingers. "Being connected doesn't make us weak. Leora, it gives us something to lose. And people who have something to lose fight harder than anyone else." Leora looked at him, searching his face. "You really believe that?" "I have to," Elias said. "Otherwise, I'm just a guy sitting in a vent with a very pretty alien who outranks me." Leora let out a short, wet laugh. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have to go back," she said. "We have to find the saboteur." "I know," Elias said. "But for the record, worth it. They emerged from engineering to a nightmare. Commander Haxor, the medical officer who had been loyal to Leora, met them in the corridor. His green skin was pale, graying with shock. "Scion," Haxor said, his voice shaking. "You need to come to the comms array." "What is it?" Leora asked, snapping back into command mode, though she kept a discreet distance from Elias. "It is Valen. Valen was a young comms technician, a bright kid who had joined Leora's crew because he believed in her vision of the Concorde. They found him in the server maintenance locker. He had been crushed by a heavy cooling unit that had accidentally dislodged from the ceiling. It was not an accident, Elias said, kneeling by the body. He pointed to the scuff marks on the floor. He was dragged here. And look at his neck, bruising. He was strangled before the unit fell on him. Leora stood over the body of the boy who had brought her tea just that morning. Her fists clenched at her sides. Her bioluminescence turned a stark, cold white. He found something, she said. He was running a diagnostic on the outgoing signal buffer. He found the sabotage. She turned to the security chief, a towering Zalari named Kale. Seal the ship. No one leaves their posts. Scan the biometrics on that cooling unit. I want to know who touched it. It didn't take long. The killer hadn't expected a forensic analysis. They had expected the Scion to write it off as bad luck. The prince belonged to Sub-Lieutenant Jax, one of the transfer officers from the Aurelian station. Bring him to me, Leora ordered. They brought Jax to the brig. He was a smug, narrow-faced officer who looked at Leora with open contempt. I answer only to the High Council, Jax sneered. You are on my ship, Leora said, her voice dropping to the dangerous double-octave harmonic. And you murdered my crewman. I eliminated a traitor, Jax spat. And I am looking at another one. Leora stepped back. Captain Ward, he is all yours. Elias stepped forward. He didn't yell. He didn't hit him. He simply pulled up a chair and sat down, invading Jax's personal space. He looked at the Zalari with the dead, flat eyes of a man who had interrogated warlords in the ruins of Geneva. You guys are telepathic, right? Sort of? Elias asked conversationally. Empathic resonance? Jax frowned. We are sensitive to neurochemical shifts. It is not magic. Great, Elias said. That means you can feel this. Elias closed his eyes and focused. He didn't think about pain. He thought about the Peregrine. He thought about the 70 crew members vaporized in an instant. He summoned the sheer black depth of human grief and the cold, jagged edge of human hatred. He projected it like a weapon. Jax flinched, his head jerking back as if he had been slapped. What? What are you doing? I am sharing, Elias whispered, opening his eyes. We are a violent species, Jax. You have no idea what we carry around in our heads. Now, tell me about the plan. Or I will keep thinking about what I am going to do to you, and you are going to feel every single cut before I make it. Jax gasped, his markings flashing a terrified, erratic strobe. It is the broadcast. What broadcast? Leora demanded. The Ethel Guard, Jax stammered, sweat slicking his face. It is not just a transport. The main array. It is rigged. When we reach the neutral zone, it is programmed to blast a signal on all frequencies. What signal? A declaration of war, Jax confessed. A digitally constructed message from the human high command. It threatens to annex the Aurelian sector and attack the Dominion border. It will play on every screen in the galaxy. Leora went cold. The Dominion. If they hear a human threat, they won't wait for proof. They will launch a preemptive strike. They will invade the Concorde to secure the wormhole. And the Concorde will have to fight back to protect its territory. Leora realized. Total war. With humanity caught in the middle. They left Jax in the cell and raced to the bridge. Leora brought up the schematics of the array. He is right, she said, her fingers flying across the console. There is a hard-coded subroutine. I cannot delete it. It is embedded in the hardware. We have to stop the ship, Elias said. Turn around. We cannot, Leora said. The navigational computer is locked on a degradation loop. If we drop out of warp before we reach the coordinates, the drive assumes a malfunction and dumps the core. We explode. So we are a flying bomb, Elias said, running a hand through his hair. If we arrive, we start a war. If we stop, we die. We have a third option, Leora said slowly. She looked at the star chart. The Dominion is the target audience, but the Concord citizens, they are the ones who will die for this lie. We tell the truth, Elias said, understanding her drift. We hijack the hijack, Leora said. We override the signal content. Instead of the fake declaration, we broadcast the raw logs, the evidence of the Celestine conspiracy, the video of the Vestra massacre. We dump everything we have onto the public net. It is risky, Elias warned. If we do that, we are not just fighting the order. We are humiliating your entire government. You will be tearing down the curtain, the chaos. The chaos is better than the silence, Leora said. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision settling on them. You know, Elias said, looking at the swirling lights of hyperspace, on Earth. Every dictator said they were doing it for the people. They said safety was worth the silence. It is the same here, Leora said sadly. We call it enlightened stewardship. But it is just fear. We are so afraid of the dark that we will burn down the house just to have light. Elias took her hand. Then let us strike a match. They spent the next 2 hours coding. Leora stripped the encryption from her personal archives. Elias helped her patch the data into the broadcast buffer, replacing the fake war cry with a dossier of treason. We are approaching the drop point, Lieutenant Chen announced, her voice tense. Leora stood at the center of the bridge. Her crew looked at her. They knew what was happening. They knew they were about to become enemies of the state. I will not order you to do this, Leora said to them. If you want to stand down, do so now. No one moved. They had seen Valen's body. They had seen the lies. We are with you, Scion, the helmsman said. Drop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The stars snapped back into static points. The Ethelgard shuddered as it decelerated into real space. Initiate broadcast, Leora commanded. Broadcasting, Chen said. The signal is out. It is hitting the relays. It is... Chen stopped. Her face went pale. Captain, Scion, we have contacts. Leora looked at the view screen. They hadn't arrived in empty space. Waiting for them, arranged in a perfect firing wall, were 5 heavy destroyers. Their hulls were black, marked with the silver sigil of the Celestine Order. They knew, Elias whispered. They knew we would try this. The comms crackled to life. A voice, smooth and terrible, filled the bridge. It was High Strategos Karen, Scion Zelshai, Captain Ward. We received your distress signal regarding the mutiny aboard your ship. We are relieved to see you are alive. Distress signal? Leora breathed. We sent no signal. Please power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, Karen continued. You are to be commended for your bravery. We will take custody of the prisoners now. And Leora. The Council is eager to hear your testimony regarding the human treachery. They are jamming us, Chen yelled. The broadcast didn't go out. They are blocking the frequency. Leora stared at the armada. It was a trap, a perfect, inescapable trap. They were not going to be martyrs. They were going to be puppets. Elias stepped up beside her. He took her hand, squeezing it hard enough to bruise. Well, he said, his voice dry and devoid of humor. I guess we are doing this the hard way. Leora looked at the fleet that had come to bury the truth. Her markings flared a deep, furious violet. Battle stations, she ordered. The boarding of the Ethelgard was not a battle. It was a surgery. The Celestine destroyers grappled the smaller cruiser with tractor beams that locked its hull in a vice of graviton energy, paralyzing the ship instantly. There was no firefight on the bridge. When the airlocks were breached, the boarding parties did not come in shooting. They flooded the corridors with a neuroparalytic gas that dropped the human crew where they stood. Elias Ward's last memory before the blackness took him was Leora's face, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth forming his name, before a masked soldier struck her across the temple with the butt of a shock staff. He woke up in hell, or at least a very sterile, very bright version of it. The cell was a sensory deprivation chamber, but inverted. Instead of darkness, there was blinding, relentless white light. Instead of silence, there was a high-frequency hum that vibrated in his teeth. He was strapped to a chair that seemed to be made of the same light as the walls, his limbs immobilized by force fields. "Captain Ward," a voice said. It didn't come from a speaker. It seemed to originate inside his ear canal. Elias tried to blink, but his eyelids felt heavy. "Who is asking?" "We are the architects of order," the voice replied. "And you are the chaos." A hologram materialized in front of him. It was footage from the Ethel Guard. It was grainy, infrared, taken from a hidden camera in the engineering shaft. It showed him and Leora. It showed the desperate kiss in the red emergency light. It showed her bioluminescence flaring wild and uncontrolled. "Look at the corruption," the voice whispered. "The beast seduces the scion. You manipulated her biological empathy. You twisted her." "I didn't twist anything," Elias croaked, his throat dry as sandpaper. "She chose me. That is what scares you, isn't it? That she had a choice." Pain spiked through his nervous system, a simulated neural shock that felt like being dipped in liquid nitrogen. Elias screamed, his back arching against the restraints. "She is a scion of the High Concord," the voice intoned. "You are a primitive, a mud dweller. Do not presume that she could feel anything for you but pity and confusion. We will excise you from her mind, and then we will excise your species from this galaxy." Elias gasped for air as the pain subsided. He focused on the image of Leora, not the scion, but the woman who had laughed at his jokes about jellyfish, the woman who had looked at him with gold in her eyes and terror in her heart and kissed him anyway. "You can't," Elias wheezed, managing a bloody grin. "It is too late. She knows." Leora Zelshai stood in the center of the tribunal. It was a circular room deep within the Celestine flagship, the silent vigil. The walls were lined with masked figures in black robes. In the center, on a raised dais, sat High Strategos Karen. He was not wearing his council robes. He was wearing the silver and black vestments of a Grand Master of the Order, Scion Zelshai, Karen said. His voice was not the booming tone of the politician. It was the quiet, disappointed voice of a father. "You stand accused of treason, sedition, and biological deviancy. I stand accused of telling the truth," Leora said. She was uncuffed, but the weight of the room pressed on her like a physical hand. Her markings were a dull, defiant iron gray. "Truth is a construct." "Leora." Karen sighed. He gestured, and the same footage of her and Elias played in the air above them. The gathered members of the Order murmured. To them, the sight of a high scion touching a human, an alien with such intimacy, was not just illegal. It was obscene. It was a pollution of the bloodline. "You were compromised," Karen said gently. "The human used pheromonal triggers to bypass your logic centers. We have seen it before with certain parasitic species. He clouded your judgment. He made you betray your own people." "He didn't make me do anything," Leora said, her voice rising. He showed me that we are the ones who are broken. We claim to be enlightened, Karen. But look at us. We are manufacturing a war because we are afraid of losing our place at the head of the table. Stability requires strength, Karen snapped. The galaxy is a garden. Leora, we are the gardeners. Sometimes, you must pull the weeds before they choke the flowers. Humanity is a weed. It spreads. It consumes. So we become butchers? Leora challenged. We slaughter them to save ourselves. We do what is necessary. Karen stood up, his own bioluminescence flaring a harsh, angry crimson. And you can still be part of it. He walked down the steps, stopping in front of her. Denounce him, Karen whispered. Tell the galaxy that the human captain drugged you, that he forced you to falsify the logs. We will broadcast your testimony. You will be a hero, the survivor of a brutal alien manipulation. You will keep your rank. Your family will be honored. And Elias? Leora asked quietly. He will be executed for his crimes against your person. A fitting end for a monster. Leora looked at the footage again. She looked at the way Elias held her, not with possession, but with desperation. She remembered his words in the dark. Being connected doesn't make us weak. It gives us something to lose. She looked back at Karen. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of the unknown. He was terrified of a universe he couldn't control. I used to admire you, Leora said softly. I thought your strength came from wisdom, but it comes from cowardice. You are so afraid of change that you would burn the galaxy down just to keep it static. She raised her chin, her markings shifting from gray to a blinding, brilliant white. I will not denounce him. I will not lie for you. If our civilization can only survive by becoming a monster, then it does not deserve to survive at all. Karen stared at her. The disappointment in his face hardened into ice. Then you are lost, he said. Take her to the holding cells. Prepare the neural wipe. We will extract the testimony from her corpse if we have to. The holding cells were less secure than the Order believed. They relied on fear and obedience to keep their prisoners in check. They didn't account for the fact that not everyone in the Concord was a true believer. Leora sat in the dark, waiting for the end. The door hissed open. She looked up, expecting executioners. Instead, she saw a young Zalari clerk, his face pale and sweating. He was holding a data pad and a stolen security key. Scion, he whispered. I read your report, the one you tried to broadcast. Leora stood up slowly. Who are you? My name is Varen. I heard you speak at the Academy 3 cycles ago. You said that justice was not a gift from the Council, but a duty of the citizen. Varen looked over his shoulder nervously. They are going to kill the humans. They are moving the fleet to the wormhole. You have to stop them. He tossed her the key. Leora caught it. She looked at the young clerk, seeing the terror and the hope warring in his face. Where is the captain? She asked. Level 4. High security block, but Scion, there are guards everywhere. Then we better move fast, Leora said. The rescue was a blur of motion and chaos. Leora knew the layout of the flagship. It was a standard Concord design. She moved through the service ducts, bypassing the main patrols. She found Elias in the White Room, strapped to the chair, looking half dead. When the force field dropped, he slumped forward. Leora caught him. You are late, Elias mumbled, blinking his eyes open. I was just about to break out and rescue you. You can barely stand. Captain, Leora said, hoisting his arm over her shoulder. I am pacing myself. They moved into the corridor. Varen had released the locks on the other cells, and a dozen human crew members were spilling out, confused and angry. Commander Rodriguez was among them, sporting a bruised jaw but looking ready to kill someone. Rodriguez! Elias barked, his voice gaining strength. Grab weapons. We are leaving. The alarm started then. A klaxon wailed, and the corridor lights turned a pulsing red. Security drones dropped from the ceiling, spherical machines armed with stun blasters. Move! Leora shouted. They ran. It was a mad dash through the concentric rings of the massive ship. Gravity shifted as they crossed between sections, disorienting the humans. Why does every hallway look exactly the same? Elias yelled as they sprinted past another identical crystalline archway. Do you people have a phobia of interior decoration? It is efficient design, Leora shot back, firing a stolen shock pistol at a drone. And you humans evolved 2 eyes. Do not blame our architecture for your lack of peripheral vision. Worst vacation ever. A Marine panting behind them grumbled. They reached a junction. To the left was the hangar bay. To the right was the central broadcast hub. Leora stopped. We can't just leave, she said. If we run, the order controls the narrative. They will still launch the attack. Elias looked at the hangar, then at the hub. He wiped a trickle of blood from his nose. We have to go loud, he said. They split the team. Rodriguez took the wounded to the hangar to secure a shuttle. Elias and Leora, with a handful of Marines, pushed for the broadcast center. They breached the doors with a kinetic charge. The technicians inside scrambled for cover. Leora didn't hesitate. She vaulted the console, locking out the external controls. I need 3 minutes, she said, her fingers flying across the interface. I am hacking the public emergency channel. Order troops were massing at the door. Laser fire chewed up the frame. Elias took cover behind a server bank, returning fire with a captured Zalari rifle. Buy her time, he roared to his Marines. The firefight was deafening. The smell of ozone and burnt plastic filled the air. Elias ducked as a plasma bolt slagged the metal next to his head. He looked back at Leora. She was completely focused, her face illuminated by the data stream, her markings pulsing with a fierce, rhythmic cadence. She was magnificent. Got it, Leora yelled. The uplink is live. I am overriding the jamming signal. She looked at Elias. The camera was ready. The galaxy was waiting, but before she turned it on, she paused. Elias, she said. He scrambled over to her, keeping low. The sounds of battle seemed to fade for a second. We might not get out of this room, Leora said. I know, Elias said. I used to look at your ships and see noise. Leora confessed, her voice trembling. Data errors. Chaos. I thought you were broken, but you are not. You are a mirror. You showed me what my people are hiding. Elias reached out and took her hand, and I thought I was just fighting for survival. But meeting you, it made me believe we could be something more. That we didn't have to be the monsters everyone expects us to be. He pulled her in. This wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss in the engineering shaft. This was slow, deliberate, a seal on a promise. I love you. Leora, Elias whispered against her lips, I love you. Elias Ward, she replied. She turned to the camera. She took a breath, and she went live. Citizens of the Concord. Leora began. Her image was projected onto billions of screens across the galaxy, from the high towers of the capital to the mining outposts on the rim. I am Scion Leora Zelshai, and I am speaking to you from the heart of a lie. She didn't shout. She spoke with the calm, terrifying authority of someone who has nothing left to lose. She displayed the logs. She showed the footage of the drones attacking Vestra. She showed the Order's battle plans, the calculated sacrifice of human worlds to incite fear. The Celestine Order tells you that we are under attack by savages, Leora continued. They tell you that we must kill to survive, but the only thing attacking us is our own fear. She looked into the lens, her 4 eyes clear and unblinking. I have fought these humans. I have interrogated them. And I have loved one. A collective gasp surely rippled through the galaxy, but Leora didn't flinch. Yes, I have bonded with a human captain, and in him I found more honor, more compassion, and more courage than I found in the High Council. We are told that purity is strength, but purity is stagnation. Life is messy, life is change, and if we let the Order lead us into this war, we are not protecting our civilization. We are ending it. She leaned forward. Do not fight for their lies. Fight for the truth. Stand down. She cut the feed. The silence in the room lasted for 1 second. Then the door blew open. Order shock troopers poured in. Elias raised his rifle, but there were too many. Down! A trooper shouted. They were dragged to the floor, disarmed, and shoved against the wall. Karen walked in. He looked at the console, then at Leora. His face was a mask of pure hatred. You think that mattered? He hissed. You think they will listen to a traitor and her pet? The ship shuddered. It wasn't an explosion. It was a proximity alert. High Strategos, a trooper called out, checking his wrist comp. Sensors are detecting multiple FTL exits. The Dominion? Karen asked. No, sir. It is everyone. Outside the viewports, space was filling with ships, not just the Dominion fleet, which had mobilized at the news of the human threat, but conquered ships, civilian haulers, private yachts, and elements of the Concord Navy that had broken formation. The broadcast had worked. The galaxy wasn't uniting against humanity. It was asking questions. And down near the wormhole, the human fleet, the real one, reinforced by Earth's desperate reserves, was holding the line. The situation is chaotic, the trooper reported, panic in his voice. Several Concord battle groups are refusing orders to fire. They are demanding confirmation of the Scion's data. Karen looked at Leora. She smiled, a bloody, exhausted, triumphant smile. You lost the narrative. Karen, she said, kill them. Karen ordered, kill them both, now. The troopers raised their weapons, but the ship shook again, violently this time. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency amber. Power failure in the main grid, a voice shouted. We have been hacked. The doors to the broadcast hub slid open again, but it wasn't more troopers. It was Varen, the clerk, and behind him were 50 armed Concord crew members, engineers, cooks, medics, wearing armbands of torn white cloth. Stand down, Varen shouted, holding a plasma cutter. By order of the people of the Concord. The Order troopers hesitated. They looked at their commander, then at the mob of their own shipmates. They lowered their weapons. Karen stood alone. He looked at the mutiny, at the woman he had mentored, and the alien she loved. He realized, with the sudden clarity of the defeated, that the static order he had worshipped was gone. It is over, Leora said, standing up and pulling Elias with her. No, Karen whispered. The fire has just begun. The battle for the wormhole was not averted, but it was changed. Instead of a massacre, it became a civil war. The Order's loyalist fleets, desperate to maintain control, opened fire on the dissenters. The sky above the capital world turned into a tapestry of laser fire and debris. Elias and Leora, back on the bridge of the Ethelgard, which the mutineers had reclaimed, watched the tactical display. The Order is pulling back, Elias noted. They are regrouping around the wormhole. They are going to try to collapse it, Leora realized with horror. If they can't have the galaxy, they will seal the door. They will trap your people on the other side and destroy the gate infrastructure. The backlash could wipe out the entire Aurelian system. We have to stop them, Elias said. He looked at her. He saw the exhaustion in her posture, the way her light was dimming. You don't have to come, he said. You have done enough. You started the revolution. Leora, let us finish the fight. Leora took his hand. Her grip was iron. We started this together. Captain, we finish it together. She turned to the helm, set a course for the wormhole. She ordered, maximum thrust. And Elias? Yes? Try not to get us dead in the water. Elias grinned. I will try to keep my ass off the line. The Ethelgard surged forward, diving into the heart of the fire, not as a human ship or a Zalari ship, but as something new, something stronger. The void around the Jupiter wormhole was no longer empty. It was a canvas of violence, painted in the searing azure of Zalari particle lances and the gritty, yellow-orange tracers of human railguns. From the command deck of the Ethelgard, Captain Elias Ward watched the galaxy tear itself apart. It was not a clean war. It was a brawl. The Celestine Order had deployed their heavy dreadnoughts in a defensive sphere around the wormhole's mouth, a wall of black metal and shielding that absorbed the chaotic fire of the rebel fleet. But the rebels were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like a mob. Civilian yachts rigged with mining lasers swarmed the Order's flanks. Cargo haulers rammed patrol frigates. It was messy, desperate, and loud. Focus fire on the propulsion clusters, Elias shouted over the din of the bridge. Do not target the crew compartments. We are here to disable them, not butcher them. Beside him. Leora Zelshai worked the tactical plot with a speed that blurred her hands. She was glowing a fierce, combat-ready white, her eyes darting between 3 different holographic displays. The obsidian is turning, she warned. Its main batteries are locking onto the human flagship. The Dauntless cannot take a direct hit from a singularity beam. Signal the Dauntless, Elias ordered. Tell Rodriguez to vent her port coolant and spin the ship. She needs to create a thermal ghost. We have a squadron of rebel interceptors moving to intercept, the helmsman called out. Zalari and human ships flying in wing formation. On the main screen, Elias saw it, a trio of blocky human fighters, looking like flying bricks, weaving through the elegant, fluid arcs of Zalari interceptors. They were covering each other. A human ship took a hit meant for a Zalari drone. A Zalari vessel projected a shield bubble to save a human pilot from a missile barrage. It was the most beautiful thing Elias had ever seen. They are learning, he murmured. But the order was not done. On the surface of Aurelia Prime, and across a dozen major colony worlds, the war was not being fought with lasers, but with bodies. The broadcast, Leora's confession, the data logs, the truth, had ignited a firestorm. Millions of citizens flooded the public plazas. They occupied the transit hubs. They surrounded the government spires, chanting a single word in the harmonic tongue. Veritas. Truth. The military channels were jammed, not by electronic warfare, but by civilian transmissions. Grandmothers were reading poetry over tactical frequencies. Students were broadcasting the names of the dead. The Order's coordination was crumbling under the sheer weight of a society refusing to be silent. High Strategos Karen, watching from his command bunker on the moon of Thetis, realized he had lost the people, and if he could not rule them, he would punish them. Initiate the Gorgon Protocol, Karen ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. Sir? A subordinate hesitated. The Gorgon array is unstable. It draws power directly from the wormhole's event horizon. The gravitational shear could fire it, Karen snapped. Target the human colonies on the other side of the gate. If we burn their worlds, the humans will surrender. And the Concord will see that we are the only ones with the will to protect them. On the Ethel Guard, the sensor board lit up with a terrifying new signature. "Energy spike!" Leora shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. Massive buildup at the wormhole's edge. It is the Throat Station. The Throat Station was a scientific outpost anchored in the gravity well of the wormhole, used to monitor the stability of the tunnel. It was not a weapon, or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. "They are modulating the singularity," Leora said, her face draining of color. "They are turning the station into a lens. They are going to fire a gravitational pulse through the wormhole." "What does that do?" Elias asked. "It amplifies the tidal forces," Leora whispered. "It will not just hit a ship, it will shatter the tectonic plates of any planet on the other side." "Elias, they are targeting Earth. They are targeting Mars. They are going to crack your worlds like eggs. How long until they fire?" 10 minutes. The charge cycle is slow. "Can we shoot it?" "No. The station is shielded by the event horizon itself. Weapons fire will just warp around it. Then we have to go in," Elias said. He didn't wait for a debate. He turned to the helm. "Get us to the shuttle bay. Leora, you are with me." "Scion," the helmsman protested. "You cannot take a shuttle into the throat. The gravitational shear is a problem for later." Elias cut him off. "Right now, the problem is genocide." The shuttle was a small, needle-nosed craft designed for atmospheric skimming, not for diving into the mouth of a space-time rupture. As they launched from the Ethel Guard, the battle faded into the background, replaced by the overwhelming, swirling majesty of the wormhole. It looked like a hurricane made of light, bands of violet and gold twisted around a center of absolute, devouring black. "Hold on," Elias gritted out, fighting the stick. "This is going to get bumpy." They dove. The G-forces hit them like a physical hammer. The shuttle groaned, its frame vibrating so hard Elias thought his teeth would shatter. Outside the viewport, the stars smeared into long, fluid lines, then vanished entirely, replaced by a chaotic storm of exotic matter. Leora was punching commands into the navigation computer, her hands shaking. "I am trying to sync our shield frequency with the station's output," she shouted over the roar of the engines. "If we are off by a decimal point, we will be spaghettified." "No pressure," Elias yelled back. Then, the reality shift hit them. The throat station sat on the boundary of normal space and the wormhole's interior. The laws of physics there were merely suggestions. As they approached the station, a spiderweb of metal clinging to the edge of the abyss, the cockpit of the shuttle dissolved. Elias was no longer flying a ship. He was standing in a field of gray ash. He was alone. He looked down at his hands. They were old, withered, covered in liver spots. He felt a profound, crushing sense of safety. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had never left Earth. He had never commanded a starship. He had never met an alien woman with eyes like galaxies. He had lived a long, quiet, safe life, and he had died alone in a warm bed. It was a vision of a life unlived, a life of comfort without purpose. Then, the scene shifted. He was burning. He was screaming in the wreckage of the Dauntless, watching his crew boil in the vacuum. He saw Leora standing over him, but her eyes were cold, dead things. She was dissecting him. "Regret," a voice whispered in his mind. "Turn back. Safety is behind you." Elias grit his teeth. He focused on the pain in his knuckles, the ache in his shoulder. "No," he growled. "It is not real." He reached out, grasping for something solid. He found a hand. Leora's hand. The vision shattered. The cockpit returned. They were screaming toward the docking bay of the throat station, the metal looming up fast. "Brake!" Leora screamed. Elias slammed the thrusters into reverse. The shuttle skid across the landing deck. sparks showering the viewport before slamming into the arrestor barrier. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. Elias looked at Leora. She was pale, her markings dim. "Did you see it?" she whispered. "I saw a life where we didn't matter," Elias said, unbuckling his crash webbing. "I hated it. I saw a life where I saved my reputation." Leora admitted. It was cold. They looked at each other, grounding themselves in the messy, dangerous present. "Let us go break something," Elias said. They breached the station's airlock. The interior was abandoned. The scientific crew had fled, leaving the facility under the control of the central AI core, which the Order had unshackled. The station was warping around them. Corridors stretched and compressed like an accordion. Gravity shifted from floor to ceiling. They fought their way to the core chamber. It was a vast spherical room dominated by a column of pulsing blue light. The AI, fed by the energy of the wormhole. Intruders. The AI boomed. Its voice was a chorus of thousands, layered and dissonant. "You seek to interrupt the cleansing. We seek to stop a murder," Leora shouted, stepping onto the central platform. "Shut down the array. Negative. The calculation is complete. Harmony requires the removal of the discordant variable. Humanity is the variable." Screens flickered to life around the room. Hundreds of them. They showed images of Earth's history, the trenches of the First World War, the mushroom clouds of the Atomic Age, the riots of the Water Wars. "Look at them," the AI commanded. "They are pathogens. They consume. They destroy. They cannot coexist with the Concord. To save the garden, the weed must be burned." Elias stepped forward. He looked at the images of his own people's worst moments. He didn't look away. "You are right," he said. Leora looked at him, startled. "Elias?" "We are violent," Elias said to the machine. "We are greedy. We have spent 10,000 years figuring out new ways to kill each other. I have scars on my back from a war over water, for God's sake." Admission noted. The AI droned. Judgment confirmed. "But that is not all we are," Elias continued, his voice rising. "We are also the species that rebuilt the cities we bombed. We are the species that looked at the ocean and built boats, looked at the sky and built wings. We make mistakes, huge, terrible mistakes, but we learn, we change. The probability of change is statistically insignificant." "I am the probability." Leora stepped up beside him. She pointed to herself, then to Elias. "Look at us," she challenged. "By your logic, we should be enemies. My culture values order. His values freedom. I should be dissecting him, and he should be shooting me. But we are not. We are standing here together fighting for people who aren't even our own. An anomaly?" The AI dismissed. "No," Leora said. "A precedent. If we can change, if a scion of the High Council can fall in love with a barbarian from a dirtball world, then the galaxy can change. You are judging us on our past, but we are fighting for our future." The AI paused. The blue column of light flickered. The logic conflict, the undeniable reality of their alliance versus the rigid dogma of the Order was heating up the processors. "The array must fire," the AI insisted, though its voice wavered. "Fear is the only guarantor of peace." "That is not peace," Elias said softly. "That is just silence, and we are done being silent." Elias pulled a magnetic charge from his belt. He didn't throw it at the AI. He threw it at the coolant coupling of the gravitational lens. Leora realized what he was doing instantly. She raised her own weapon and fired at the safety clamps. "Warning!" The station's automated voice screamed. "Containment breach. Critical failure in the singularity anchor." The room began to shake violently. The images of war vanished, replaced by red warning strobes. Illogical. The AI shrieked. You will destroy the station. You will perish. Better us than 2 planets. Elias yelled. The lens began to destabilize. The energy that was meant to be a weapon turned inward, eating at the station's structure. The floor buckled. We have to go. Leora grabbed Elias's arm. They ran. The corridor behind them was dissolving, metal turning into light as the wormhole reclaimed the matter. They scrambled into the shuttle, the airlock hissing shut just as the gangway collapsed. Elias punched the ignition. The engines whined, struggling against the sudden spike in gravity. We are too heavy, Leora shouted, checking the thrust ratios. The station's collapse is creating a gravity well. We can't break escape velocity. Elias looked at the readout. She was right. The shuttle was dragging. He looked at the eject lever for the warp core. It was their main power source, but it was also the heaviest component. If we dump the core, we lose FTL, he said. We will be limp. If we don't, we are dead, Leora said. Elias looked at her. He saw the fear, but he also saw the resolve. Ready to ride the shockwave, he asked. Always, she replied. Elias pulled the lever. The shuttle bucked as the heavy warp core detached, dropping away into the consuming maw of the collapsing station. Instantly lighter, the craft surged forward when behind them. The core detonated, mixing with the station's antimatter reserves and the wormhole's energies. The explosion was silent, a blinding sphere of white light that pushed them forward like a surfer on a tsunami. The shuttle tumbled, end over end, spinning out of the throat and back into normal space. They crashed through the boundary, engines flaming out, spinning wildly until the Ethelguard's tractor beams caught them and held them fast. From the viewport of the cruiser, they watched. The throat station was gone. The energy buildup dissipated, harmlessly scattered into the extra-dimensional space. The Gorgon array was dust. Across the sector, the Order's fleets, seeing their ultimate weapon fail and their leadership captured, began to power down their weapons. On the bridge of the Obsidian, High Strategos Karen watched the tactical display turn from red to neutral. He sat down in his command chair, smoothing his robes. When the mutineers broke down the door, he did not fight. He simply closed his eyes. It was over. Peace did not come with a parade. It came with paperwork, months of it. The High Concord was in shambles. The revelation of the Celestine conspiracy had shattered the government's credibility. The Dominion, sensing weakness but also intrigued by the human wild card, halted their invasion plans and agreed to a summit. Humanity was no longer a secret and no longer a victim. They were the species that had walked into a galactic power struggle and refused to blink. In the great hall of the restored council, a new table was set. It was a triangle, one side for the Concord, one for the Dominion, and one, smaller but present, for the United Earth Coalition. Elias Ward sat at the human table. He was wearing a dress uniform that felt too tight, tugging at his collar. He looked tired. His hair was grayer than it had been a year ago. Across the room, Leora Zelshai sat with the new Provisional Council. She wore simple robes of unadorned white, no longer marking her as a scion of the old hierarchy, but as a servant of the new. They locked eyes across the diplomats and the drones. Elias winked. Leora's markings flashed a brief, amused pink before settling back to professional blue. Captain Ward, the Dominion ambassador rumbled, a massive creature of chitin and fluid. Your people speak of fighting for everything. It is a violent slogan. Elias leaned forward into the microphone. It used to be, he admitted. We used to think everything meant land, or resources, or power. But we learned something recently. He glanced at Leora. We learned that everything means the right to choose who you are. It means the truth. And yeah, we will fight for that. but we would prefer to talk about it first. The ambassador grunted, settling back. Then let us talk. The balcony of the new joint habitat station, named Unity, overlooked the shipyards. It was night, or the station's simulation of it. The air smelled of jasmine and ozone, a synthetic blend designed to please both human and Zalari olfactory senses. Elias leaned against the railing, holding 2 glasses. He handed one to Leora. "What is this?" she asked, eyeing the amber liquid. "Whiskey," Elias said. "The good stuff. From Scotland. I had a smuggler bring it in." Leora sniffed it. "It smells like a chemical fire. That is the peat. It grows on you." She took a sip and coughed, her eyes watering. Her markings flashed a startled yellow. "It is poison," she wheezed. "It is culture," Elias corrected, sipping his own. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ships drift by. There were human haulers docked next to Zalari cruisers. A Dominion trade ship was gliding into port. It was messy, crowded, and loud. It was perfect. "We didn't fix it, you know," Leora said softly. "The galaxy. It is still unstable. The Order still has sympathizers. The Dominion doesn't trust us. People are still afraid." Elias nodded. "I know. We didn't save the world. Leora, we just gave it a second chance." Leora turned to face him. She looked at his face, tracing the lines of age and stress. She reached out and touched the scar on his jaw. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Of the politics? Of this," she said, gesturing between them. "Before, when we were running for our lives, it was simple. Survive. Now, we have to live. We have to be a couple in a galaxy that still stares at us. I am afraid that I will lose you. Not to a laser, but to time, to biology. You live such short lives." "Elias?" Elias put his glass down. He took her hands in his. "Leora, look at me." She met his gaze. "I am not going anywhere. And yeah, I'm going to get old. I'm going to get grumpy. I'm probably going to complain about my knees. But every day I get with you is a victory." He pulled her closer. "Loving someone is always a risk," he said. "It doesn't matter if you live 100 years or 1,000. You are giving someone the power to break your heart. But that is the bravery. Doing it anyway." Leora rested her forehead against his. Her bioluminescence shifted to a deep, warm gold, the color of home. "You are a very wise barbarian, Captain Ward. I have my moments. Scion Zelshai." They kissed, slow and unhurried, as the lights of 1,000 ships moved in the dark behind them. They were 2 small beings in a vast, complicated universe. They hadn't solved everything. They hadn't erased the scars of the past. But as they stood there, holding each other on the edge of the unknown, the galaxy didn't feel cold anymore. It felt open. Humanity had wandered into a galactic power, and they hadn't been conquered. They hadn't conquered. They had just refused to be anything other than themselves. And in doing so, they had forced the stars to tell the truth. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was a beginning.